podcast. Hurrah. My name is Sukhmani. I am the festival founder and director, contrary to the shirt. I lost my staff one. First off, thank you all so much for taking the time on this Saturday, a weekend, to join us as we celebrate YA and Canadian literature and go out with a bang. Don't forget, you can pick up copies of our lovely panelists, moderators' books via your nearest public library. They're also almost always willing to order in books, so don't be afraid to ask for them. Or purchase from like a local bookstore. So if you're in the Vancouver area, you can check out Iron Dog Books, Massey Books, Western Sky, and so many more, just in time for your winter haul. Am I right? On behalf of Infusion, though, as well, we are presenting this festival to you from the unceded. And if you don't know what that means, it means stolen lands and territories of the Tsawwassen, Squamish, Musqueam, Stolo, Katz, Coquitlam, Coast Salish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, who have been the stewards of these lands and territories since time immemorial. We offer them our deepest thank you and respect for allowing us to gather here today. We also offer our deepest respects for elders who have passed and those who are with us today. Reconciliation, though, doesn't just start with what I just said. It's something we need to practice every day. It means implementing those calls to action from the TRC and Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Two-Spirit reports in all aspects of our lives, personally, professionally, anywhere and everywhere, because the responsibility isn't just at a government level, it's also at a personal level, especially as we are settlers on these stolen lands. We would also like to bring to attention what a lot of colonial policies and modern day colonization is doing and how it's impacting various Indigenous territories and nations across the land. You'll see us sharing some links shortly in the Zoom chat. So we really hope you take some time to open them, check them out, and just overall share and donate and do whatever you have the capacity to at the end of the day. One last thing, though, before I go on mute and peacefully peace out, we have a zero tolerance policy for anyone who invokes any kind or participates in any kind of hate, interference, and more. You will promptly be flagged and banned. We're here at the end of the day to nurture a safe space where we can all connect and have fun. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to Rob. Thank you all so much once again. We hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting to be here with this amazing group of authors today. I'll just do a quick introduction of myself and then let everybody go around. So I'm Rob Bittner. This is, I think, my third time moderating for this wonderful conference. So I'm very excited to be here again. My main work is with children's and YA literature, and I'm an educator and work somewhat in libraries as well. So without further ado, let's get our authors to introduce themselves and maybe tell us about either your latest book or the book that you think is most related to our topic today of mental health. I think I'll just go around in order of my screen for this first round. So Bev, if you would like to go first.
Thanks, Rob. I'm Bev Katz Rosenbaum. I'm the author of I'm Good and Other Lies and some other YA and middle grade novels. I'm Good and Other Lies is about a teen's struggle with her dysfunctional family, and it's set against the backdrop of Toronto's first COVID-19 lockdown. I'm also a freelance editor. I'm a former in-house editor at Harlequin Books and McGraw-Hill Ryerson, and I've also taught writing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome. Next, we have Sabina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sabina Khan, and I'm the author of Meet Me in Mumbai, which just came out last September. And my previous books are called The Love and Lies of Roxana Ali, and Zara Hussain is here. And I'm very, very excited to be here. I always love these panels and this festival. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sara.
Thanks, Rob. My name is Sara de Waard, and this is my debut novel, actually. It's called White Lies, and it's a story about Missy, who also had a dysfunctional past and some trauma in her life, and she's going through her mental health journey and high school and her first crush. So that's my debut novel. I'm also a screenwriter, and I'm a teacher as well.
Thank you very much for that, and congrats on your debut.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Radecki. The novel I wanted to talk about in relationship to this is my novel Messenger 93. It's about a young girl who's been ostracized, 16-year-old girl who's been ostracized by her friend group. And she receives a message from a crow that she needs to go out and save the world. And I wanted to explore white savior complex in it and see is that something that's happening in the mind, or is it happening in real life, like in a magic realism kind of way? So I'm also a teacher an instructor actually at U of T SCS. I teach story structure in film and screenplays and books and memoirs. That's me.
Great. Thank you so much and welcome. Next up, we have Matthew.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Dawkins, and can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, perfect. My name is Matthew Dawkins, and I'm the author of A 2-Week Break. It's my debut novel, and it's a story about a young ballet dancer named Naomi, who, after the passing of her best friend and also an injury that stops her from dancing, she has to learn to sort through her grief, learn who she wants to be outside of her best friend, who she wants to be outside of ballet, and what all of that means for her and her journey. And I'm in my 4th year at Western University in London, Ontario. And yeah, that's me.
Fabulous. Another debut. Yay. That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And next up we have Nafiza.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nafiza Azad, and I write speculative fiction. My latest book is Road of the Lost, but the book I'm going to talk about mostly is The Wild Ones, which is about a group of girls who are all survivors of various things and how they band together to save other girls like them.
Great. Thank you so much. Always good to see everybody in this space and the breadth of knowledge and from the debuts to the many published. It's really great to have you all here today. So mental health is obviously a very relevant topic all the time, but especially these days, considering, you know, everything we've been going through with COVID and with, well, so many other things, a lot of political shifts, a lot of things around book challenges and book banning and a lot of sort of, you know, hate and things like that. So I'm thinking, or I'm wondering, sort of in your own work within this field of like YA literature, how do you approach the topic of mental health within your work? How does that sort of come about? And I guess, is it a conscious thing that you want to work into your work, or is it something that just happens along with the story that you're telling? So maybe I will start with Barbara, if that's all right this time around.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, so for me, I started Messenger 93 because I was really interested in this idea that, you know, when a lot of people, when you're young, you think that you're destined for greatness, that you have this kind of inner knowledge inside you that you're very special. And it started because a young boy, a friend of my daughter's, he believed that he was reincarnated from Jesus. Now, he didn't have, I wouldn't call that a mental health issue, but it was something that I wanted to explore in this story. Does it mean that it's a mental health issue? What does it come from, that desire? Is it tenable through a life to have that sort of expectation hanging over you that, you know, you have to have this super special outcome in your life? And through the storytelling, it starts with this girl who's been ostracized by her friend group. And when she gets this message that she has to save the world, is it happening? You know, is she destined to save the world? What is her duty out there? How does she integrate in the world? How does she make peace with what's happened with her friends, her loss, her sense of isolation, and also, you know, feeling special is a beautiful thing too. So those things butt up against each other, the sense that we're special and the world keeps telling us that you're not special, that you're small, that you should be, you know, kept down somehow. So I just wanted to explore that through a series of adventures that she goes through when she goes on her journey.
Great, thank you. Next, maybe we'll go with Sara.
When I approached this novel, it's called White Lies, and when I approached it, I thought I was going through my own mental health journey, and I had just recently worked on a screenplay that kind of fell through and was very close to being optioned, and then it didn't get optioned. And so as I was dealing with my own therapy and learning about what kind of put me where I was, at this age, I thought it would be interesting to write a story about a young girl who was who was closer to that age, because I had been learning about things like your ACE score, which is how many adverse childhood experiences you have when you're younger. So I wanted to create Missy, who had a lot of these childhood experiences that could later cause mental health issues. And I wanted to approach it, what it could be like in your teens, to start dealing with it right then and there, so that perhaps it doesn't creep up on you in your 30s or 40s. You can learn to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Matthew, would you like to go next?
Yeah, for sure. I think Until We Break, for me, my approach was very much, I tried to tackle it head on, because I do think as a YA author, we have sort of like a responsibility to be aware of the audience, of the people that will be reading our work. But I also feel like sometimes we don't give that audience the respect, or maybe like the full, like give them the like acknowledge the fact that they're capable of much more than we think they might be capable of. And so for me, approaching mental health meant that I really wanted to showcase and explore the nuances of mental health, the ups and the downs, and sometimes how like overcoming specific trauma, in my book's case, Naomi with the passing of her best friend and her career, like shifting and sliding. Sometimes overcoming trauma means stepping forward, means stepping back, means sidestepping. And I think it's just really important for me specifically to make sure that I'm really covering the breadth of what it can look like to grief and overcome and challenge yourself, and what all of that can look like. So for me, it was really just about exploring and showing the gritty and the ugly and the beautiful all at once.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. Sabina, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, Rob. So with Meet Me in Mumbai, it's in two parts. It's told in two parts, and the first part is about Aisha, who is 17 and she's away from her home, and she's come back to the US to finish her high school. And she's incredibly lonely and homesick. And she meets this guy, she falls in love, and she ends up pregnant and alone. And I wanted to sort of explore this feeling of isolation, of being disconnected or feeling lost in a sea of people. Like there's people everywhere around her, but she feels so alone. And how, I think in our community, talking about mental health is still not something that is very easy to do or to think about. And I think in her case, she just internalizes it and she just deals with it however she can without really seeking help or asking for help. And then later on, when she decides to place her baby for adoption, the process that she goes through first, almost thinking that an abortion would be better and then changing her mind. But that whole process for a 17-year-old can have tremendous impact on her mental health. But she really, even when she's asked by a counselor if she wants to talk, in her mind, it's like she's showing weakness if she admits how scared she is and how confused she is. And so that was really important for me to show that at 17, we shouldn't have to think that we have to deal with all these things ourselves. I feel like, it should feel that it's okay and good to seek help. With the second part where, we see her daughter at 18 trying to figure out where she fits in. Again, that's something where, I don't know if that would qualify really as a mental health issue per se, but it's more how she feels, like that feeling of kind of being neither here nor there, that can develop into something if it's not explored, I guess, and if she doesn't find some sort of the answers that she's seeking, and the history that she wants to connect with, her origin story sort of. And I think these are all things that in the South Asian community, we're still not talking about these as much as we should be, perhaps. And yes, I just wanted to explore that. So that was a lot on my mind when I was writing both parts of the story.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Nafiza, did you want to go next?
Sure. For the wild ones, this was an own voices story. So I was dealing with unknotting a knot in my own life and things I had gone through. So if when you approach pain of a sort that shatters you, sometimes for your own health and sanity, you don't approach it whole. You approach it in bites, in things that you can handle. So this is most reflected in the structure of the novel, which is a lot of it is vignettes and short sentences and short scenes and short chapters to give because a sexual assault and surviving all of that, it just shatters the core of you. So I wanted the people reading it, people who have suffered it, I wanted them to gain some comfort from it. And my main characters, they are loud, they wear flashy clothes, because in a way the sartorial splendor is just, it's a veneer, it's a facade to hide themselves from the world, because they need that space between themselves and the rest of the world, because that's what they've learned, that the world will hurt them if it has a choice. If it can't hurt them, it will hurt them. And then my main character Paheli, she when we first meet her, it is after the fact, after she has been hurt. So what you see of her, she's loud, she's brash, she's intentionally immature, because that's how she handles the world. And she has learned that though time might lessen the intensity of the pain will never go away. And so I wanted to convey that it's okay to be scarred, that it's okay to put yourself back together again, because we are all the sum of our experiences. And mental health, like even at the end of the book, they're not all okay, and that's fine, because being okay is not a magical at the end of the book everything's okay and everything's neat and tidy. That life doesn't work that way. So The Wild Ones is fantastic realism in which there's magic, but it's very much set in the real world. And one of the ways it is fantastic is that the girls have between a corridor which allows them to travel from one city to another via doors in the corridor. And this was also a way for me to approach mental health, because freedom and the right to move after you've suffered stuff like that is one of the most essential things. Be not feeling like you are stuck in one place. So this was one way I conveyed to them that you have the right, that girls have the right to, everyone has the right to freedom, but the book especially considers women and girls. So I just wanted that to portray that. Oh, it's hard to talk about this book. Yeah, so mentally, my main points were that it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm. That is, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a huge thing to remember sometimes, and very easy to forget at the same time sometimes. So thank you for that reminder. Bev, last but not least.
Thank you. Yeah, everybody else's books sound so good. I want to read all your books, man. Yeah, so for me, whether I intend it or not, dysfunctional families and people with depression always show up in my books. And I think, that's partly because I grew up in a dysfunctional alcoholic home and was diagnosed with depression afterward. And I think we all become obsessed with these themes as authors, right? And we try and make sense of our own stories. So for me, writing is very much that. But also, I know how much literature helped me when I was struggling. And, in Kidlit, we talk about representation a lot. And when you see yourself and your experiences mirrored in a book, that in itself offers comfort. You don't feel alone, because, there still is stigma about talking about all this stuff. So when we see ourselves reflected, it does offer some comfort. And I want to be that author. I want to be that person who offers kids and teens reflections of themselves and to help them feel less alone. Yeah. So, and I'm Good in Other Lies it's semi-autobiographical. It's the book I was working on for years and years, and basically is about how I grew up. And then, of course, when the COVID pandemic came along, it didn't take long for statistics to come out. I think Kids Help Phone reported something like a 320% increase in service demands. So I thought that would give the book a little more immediacy and relevance. Yeah, we're already in a teen mental health crisis, but that just made everything worse. And yeah, so that's why I was very intentional in at the end of that book, giving actual resources for teens to link to. I also included scenes showing the main character at the end reaching out for help, but not at first even receiving the kind of help she wanted. And I was very intentional about that message. I wanted to show, you might reach out for help and still not get what you need or what you want, but keep trying. The help is out there. So yeah, that's how I approach things.
Thank you so much. These are great, such important words and such important messages in all of your work. So thank you for these incredible answers. You said, you talked a little bit, Bev, about how you relied a little bit on you relied some on your own experience. You also wanted to sort of be realistic in how you portrayed things. And I know a number of you have spoken about sort of that realistic component. And I guess I'm also curious about that balance between sort of realism, fiction, reality and fiction. How do you balance these depictions of reality and mental health challenges and challenges with trauma, but also like with this idea that literature sometimes is something people reach out to for an escape from reality. So I'm wondering if maybe you want to start, if you'd be okay with that, Bev, and then I will go around with the rest of the group.
Yeah, so I think I write naturally with some humor. Also, I'm a pop culture junkie, so all my books are always littered with tons of pop culture references. So there are elements of fun in my books too, and I feel I've never found it really difficult to balance, heavy realism with humor or escapist elements. I think life itself is a mix of comedy and tragedy, right? There's always stuff to cry about. There's always stuff to laugh about as well. So for me, that I just don't even think about it. I think it happens pretty naturally. Yeah. I hope people look beyond the cover of I'm Good in Other Lies, especially though it's maybe not until you read it that you would realize, oh, it's funny too. So yeah, I hope people read it. I think it's finding readers who are finding that and appreciate that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, it's important to have that hope and humor mixed in there for sure.
The balance, the heaviness for sure.
Yeah. Matthew, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. This is a really good question, Rob. I think I see it a little bit differently, especially in my writing Go Until We Break. I think for me, especially this debut novel, I see my writing as not necessarily escape, but I see it as reflecting the world that we live in currently, and giving us the tools to deal with that. And I think sometimes the tool is escape. I think sometimes the tool is also didacticism, or the tool can be learning in different forms. And I think for me, it's not necessarily so much of striking a balance, but it's discovering what tool I need or what tool I want to distribute to my readers at any point in time. So with Until We Break In, it wasn't necessarily escapism, but it was more so asking general questions about, hey, many of us are thinking, who do we want to be? How do we change the ideas of how we thought of ourselves before, and how do we evolve, especially as young people? Like, how do we grow up? What does adolescence mean? And dealing with all of those questions, what can we begin to envision for ourselves? And I think getting to the core of all of those questions was what I tried to strive for. So for me, it was much less of a balance in trying to figure out, is escapism what I want to contribute in this novel, or do I want to probably give young teenagers the tools and the viewpoint to begin to imagine themselves differently? So yeah, that was me.
I love that. That's great. And thank you for bringing up this sort of didactic element as well, because I literally wrote that down like in the last round, because I was like, oh, I hope somebody will address that, and if not, so thank you. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Nafiza, do you want to go next?
Sure. Like Matthew, wait. So I write speculative fiction, so the escapism is always there, because speculative fiction is considered to be escapist literature because, you know, magic and fantasy. But with the Wild Ones, my biggest intention was that every time we talk about women's rights and, you know, feminism, we're always told to be, or rather it's thought to be, you know, implicit, just be subtle about it. And I was so tired of being subtle. I thought my biggest motive for writing was that I wanted to be explicit about it. I'm going to tell a book about girls, and I'm going to demand that people listen, even if it makes them uncomfortable, because it's so easy to talk about, especially rights about women of color, and then just sort of, you know, shrug it aside. It happens to someone else. You know, I wanted people to, reading the book, to just be confronted by these things that make them uncomfortable. So even if the setting was fantastical, I wanted the story itself to be realistic enough that this could happen to anyone, it could happen to you. How would you deal with it? How loudly would you scream? This is why the screams of the girls in the book are their weapons. That's their main weapon. They scream and they bring down the men who are trying to hurt them. So I wanted to subvert that. That's how I approached it. So there wasn't much about escapism. I wasn't going to let people escape by reading my books. No, I wanted them to squirm and feel uncomfortable. And I think I succeeded. Yeah.
I would say so. Thank you for that. Barbara, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I feel like I'm going to lose track of the original question, but because everyone's saying such incredible things that just make me want to say a whole bunch of other stuff, but
just go with it. Go with it.
So when I also like to write really heightened drama happening to people who are otherwise, let's say, ordinary or regular or everyday, and see how much stuff I can put them through and have them come through it. And the didactic element of that, I guess, is that, you know, if you're reading a book and you feel like your life is hopeless or you're in a hopeless situation, you can maybe see that the character in the book is overcoming huge, enormous obstacles against all the odds. And maybe that gives you a grain of hope that you can do it too. It takes you outside of your head into an experience. YA has a fantastic ability to really embody characters, where the characters really embody their pain and their suffering and their love and their lust and their all of that stuff. And so that heightened element of being a teenager in a book just gives so much place for, you know, the experiences in a story. And I have that, you know, where just things keep happening that are bad, worse, and how the character gets through it. But going back to the didactic aspect of it, I was exploring savior syndrome first. And then the more I learned, of course, the more I learned about white savior syndrome. And so I really wanted to put that in there in the book because it was that was part of what I was struggling with in my real life as Barbara, trying to figure out, trying to learn, trying to represent all of that. So my real life was making its way into the story, but you know, it could also go, like, there were drafts where it went too far, where it was too on the nose, it was too, you know, preachy or whatever. And I had to figure out through multiple drafts how I could keep up that, you know, that high-paced story where, you know, it doesn't stop running on some engine, while keeping this message, this question underneath. What is white savior syndrome? What does it mean? What's the good aspect of it? What's the bad? Well, the bad aspect, I think, is pretty obvious, but you know, what can the lead character take away from her exploration of that? So all of those things were working together as I was building that story.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Sabina, do you want to go next?
Oh, thank you. I think for me, like Bev said, that when I'm writing, I just naturally try to infuse like humor and sarcasm, because that's like my own go-to when I'm dealing with stressful situations, humor and sarcasm. So my characters do that too. And I also find that no matter, especially as young adults, when they're going through difficult times in their lives, they're still falling in love. They're still getting involved in drama. All those things don't just stop because something tough is happening. And I think it makes it more realistic. And that's just how, like, I don't know, in my experience, that's just how life has been. So I think that kind of naturally just balances out the rough patches, and with something light, because that's real life, right? Like, I mean, nobody's life is like, either all bad or all good. Like, we all just go through times, the rough times and good times, and we still have the bad things and the good things all around us, happening all around us. So yeah, I mean, I try to just keep it light in certain places, and then when it needs to be heavy, it's heavy. That's just how I just try to kind of balance it out like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the question, right?
I have sort of lost track of the question too, but I'm loving where this is all going. So I'm just not going to try to go back. Let's just keep going.
Everyone's answers are so great. So
this is amazing. Also, I should say, if any of you have questions for each other after we're done the round, like, feel free to like throw your hand up, and we can do some of that too. So we're going to finish off this question with Sara, and then if you have any questions for each other, we can work with that as well.
There's so many great answers to that question. What I was thinking about was, for myself, with Missy and the character in White Lies, I used a lot of self-deprecating humor for her to get through things. And like panelists were saying, humor is a good way to escape. And she also has a romantic love interest in the story. And since a lot of her mental health issues deal with her inability to self-love and her distrust of people, I think that the idea of the romance in it, a successful romance in the story, was uplifting, and the escapism in it. But I also agree that from being a teacher for all these years and teaching intermediate students, grade 7s and 8s, like they just have a way of getting through and being resilient, but there is a lot of darkness in the teen years and through hormones and puberty and everything. So for me, I just tried to have that bit of self-deprecating humor and the love interest as the escapism. And I hope it worked. I had teens read it, and the feedback they gave me, a lot of kids at my school read it, and they said it was hilarious. And I was not expecting that response, but I guess the humor did come through that, and they really enjoyed it. And then I had people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s read it and say that their escape was to be a teen again and to know that it does get better. So hopefully it worked, but that's the escapism and the reality that I based in that book.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do any of you have any questions for each other as we're going? I do want to leave that opportunity open. If not, though, I can ask more questions. Okay, so Nafiza.
No.
No? Okay. Well, it was actually interesting that you brought it up, Sara, because you mentioned like teen readers getting in touch with you and being like, this is how I saw the book. This is how I reacted to the book. And it made me wonder, have any of the rest of you had teen readers reach out to you, or have you been in any like situations where you've had a chance to speak with readers of your work, and sort of what reactions have there been, and have any of those reactions surprised you? Does anybody want to start? Yeah, Barbara.
Well, the opposite in a way was when I was developing the story. I asked to participate in a classroom discussion in a high school, and I was lucky enough to be able to sit in a creative writing room, and I gave them a kind of seminar to start so we could talk about story structure and all of that. But I wanted to ask the teens, because in my story, it's about a teen who gets a message from a crow, and she believes it and follows the message. And I wanted to ask the teens, what did they feel? Did they feel this was plausible? What did they feel that this meant? And the answers that they gave me, it was such a beautiful experience, because of course my first thing was everyone's going to say, well, it can't happen, right? There's no such thing as a crow talking to you. But instead, everyone believed that a crow could talk to her, believed there could be a message there, and all of them had different takes on what that might mean and what she should do from that. So that experience was really wonderful for me, the pre-writing experience.
That's amazing. That's great. Anybody else want to go next? Yeah, Nafiza.
I've had readers who read The Wild Ones message me and tell me that they appreciated me writing it because it felt like I was reading their emotions and putting it out on the paper, and that was I felt like my job had been done. So that was insane.
That's great. That's great. Anybody else? I don't want to make assumptions about who's had a chance to speak with readers and everything. So I'm just, Matthew, you look like you were putting your hand up.
Yeah, I did like a pinky moment. I'm not sure why I did that. But yeah, I think I have a unique experience in history because my publisher is Wattpad Books, which means that my book started off on Wattpad, which for those of you that don't know, Wattpad is an online reading and writing platform where people get to share their stories and readers get to comment and vote and talk about it. And it's this really great community. And so I started there, and I had the amazing experience of having so many teenagers comment and read my story, and Wattpad and comment and read my story and tell me that they saw themselves through Naomi, and they felt for her and felt really connected to her journey. And I think that's what really struck home for me. And I've also had after the novel has come out and been published with a bunch of edits, I've also had experiences where people in real life have come up to me, and I think what's always surprising is people say this is a lot more sad than I thought it would be. And I'm sometimes life is sad. I don't know. But I think that's the beautiful thing. And people get to take the bits and pieces from the novel that I think help and matter. And it's a beautiful thing. And then on top of that, my third piece is I haven't gotten the opportunity to meet these folks, but I have gotten the opportunity to speak through other people that also know someone who's a young Black ballet dancer. And I think even though I haven't met with the actual dancers themselves, the people that gift it to them, I always tell them that I hope they feel seen and represented and heard and acknowledged. And sometimes they tell me their stories about the experiences that they go through, and I'm Naomi goes through that in the book. And it's a really amazing feeling to know that these stories are being amplified and that I'm playing a small role in helping them feel seen and acknowledged, and hopefully helping them feel more safe too.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Bev.
Oh, I just want to say, Matthew, I think it's amazing that it's a Wattpad book. My daughter works at Wattpad, yay Wattpad. In terms of my own books, I've spoken to a lot of students and I get reader mail as well. And it's funny because even though I write these heavy books, I'm always wanting to hear that it's funny. I don't know, maybe I'm insecure about my humor or something, but so it's really nice for me when people say it's funny, but also I have people saying, oh, I cried here and my friend cried here. So it's nice to get that full, lots of different kinds of reactions to the book. I love that. Yeah.
Sabina, did you want to go next? And then I think, Sara, you have a question. So.
Yeah, sure. I just like everyone else, I've had emails or, just meeting readers at festivals saying that the story is really very similar to their experiences, because all my books are about girls that are pushing back against their parents' expectations or society's expectations, just wanting to be who they are and live the lives, they want to live. And so, so these young people coming up to me and telling me this. It feels very fulfilling. And like Nafiza was saying, I feel like I've done my job, like, because I grew up never seeing that in books. So it's really nice to be able to do that for readers who, who were like me when I was growing up. And so yeah, it's very, I think it's very satisfying, but it's also, because when you're writing for young people, there's always fear that, you're, if you're reaching them and if you're doing it right. And so, I have 3 books out now, so I'm starting to feel a little bit more confident, but then with every new book, all the confidence just disappears, and I feel like I'm writing for the first time again, and I'm just, I have no idea how people will receive it, but fingers crossed.
Yeah. Sara, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in addition to that, some of the feedback I've gotten, because in the story it deals with poverty as well, and it's so relatable, but I've noticed that some teens have told me that they cried or they felt so bad because they're in a different social situation than the character in the book, and other characters who are impoverished and who have suffered losses like Missy has. They've said that it was relatable but funny. So it's interesting to notice the difference, who found the humor in the book and who found the sadness in the book. So that was just something I've noticed along my path too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. These are such great, I love hearing about the different reactions. I know my own reactions, but it's always good to hear about the different experiences people have with their readership. I do have a few questions coming in from the audience, and a couple of them are working into the last main question I was going to ask. So I'm going to try to combine everything here and see if I can make it work. Okay, so so writing is obviously something that is very important to, your works becoming published. And often these panels focus on the content of your work. So I'm gonna try to move a little bit into the, the process itself. And when we're talking about mental health and we're talking about sort of the state of the world and everything, I'm curious, how does writing help you process sort of the world around you? And one of the questions from the audience is sort of like, how do you cope after writing a particularly emotional or powerful scene in your work? So I'm wondering if you can, if we can go around and try to speak to that. And maybe let's start with, who haven't I started with yet? Sabina, do you want to go first? And then we'll go around from there.
Thank you, Rob. That's such a great conversation, because I definitely process a lot of my own things, even from way in the past, from years before, like years earlier when I'm writing, because I always write from a place of my own experience and what I've gone through. And it's kind of hard not to. It's kind of hard to dissociate yourself from what has happened to you, what you've gone through, and not infuse that. Even though, yes, of course, like something that happened to me 30 years ago is, it's going to be slightly different than what's happening to my characters, but those feelings, the reactions, the trauma or the joy and everything is still kind of, it's relatable at any age. And so I definitely look, I draw from what I'm feeling currently. So the book that I wrote 2 books during the pandemic, and both of them were harder than anything I'd written before, just because I myself was not in a good place, just with what was happening in the world around me, and everything, not just being stuck at home, but just all the violence and the hatred. And it was so, just watching it on the news all the time, it was so draining. And, so I think writing really helped, writing characters who were going through their own, difficult emotional journeys and dealing with microaggressions or dealing with like bigger, issues like racism, whatever, on a bigger scale. That really did help to focus on something that I felt was going to be helpful, like my way of doing something that might help provide some sort of, closure, or just something, some connection with the reader later on when the book came out. And And I think the other thing is just, we, as writers, it's such a solitary profession, right? Like you're just sitting in your room and writing. Well, I know some people go to coffee shops and stuff, but you're still kind of, it's not like an office type situation, right? And so I think we tend to get really in our heads with what we're feeling and what our characters are feeling. And sometimes that can be a little bit hard to separate because, and I think, Rob, you had mentioned like how we feel or how we react to something we've written, I think. I've been rambling, lost track. But yeah, I mean, it's hard writing emotional scenes. Sometimes, like I often cry when I'm writing a really, really emotional scene. And then I cry again when I read it later on, even though I'm the one who wrote it. So I don't know what that's about, but it's just something because you put a little bit of yourself on the page for every scene, really. I mean, maybe not every single scene, but the scenes that are particularly important to you, and you leave a little bit of yourself there, and all you can do is hope that the readers will get that, like kind of get how much of yourself you're pouring into your stories and into your characters. And so I think for me, I have definitely processed a lot of things through my stories. It's really helped me unravel things that have bothered me or I've been stuck and I have never really got closure. So it's really helped. So, that's a win-win, I guess, for me, as far as I can see.
Thank you. Nafiza, do you want to go next?
Sure. So there were two questions, right? One of them was, how do you handle the world around you in your writing? And how does writing help you figure out the world?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so for me, writing has always been very cathartic. I tend to walk out all my issues when I'm writing books. And if you read my villains, you might notice some flashes of real people because if you make me angry, I'm going to put you in my book in ways that you don't understand. So yeah, that's how I handle writing. I use my words. I guess it's the point of losing myself in the world I have created, which allows me to exist fully in my mind and at that same time walk through whatever I'm going through in real life. Of course, during the pandemic, this became hard. So for a long time, I didn't even write because it was like the door had closed and there was no light coming through it or underneath it. So it was difficult. It was a difficult time. Hopefully we are past it. And for the other question, how do you handle writing difficult things? So in my latest book, in my work in progress, I killed like 40 people and I thought, wow, that's hard, right? And then I didn't realize I had to bury all of them. So I had to write fictional funerals. And oh my God, that was so much more difficult. I was rethinking all my life choices. Why did I make this decision to write this book? And after that, I just didn't write for a while. I had to lie on the floor and be like, okay, things are okay. Nobody's dead in the real world. But then it's just that as writers, you get so in touch, like so connected with your characters that they more often feel like realer to you than the people you actually know, because you talk or think about them more than you do the people you live with, or that just may be me. But I guess when you're writing, like for me, when I'm writing very difficult things, I need to process them. I need to take some time off and then sort of heal from what I've written or whatever I've put myself through. Because if you write, I believe as writers, you all can empathize. When you write difficult things, you are going through the same things you're writing your characters going through. So if they are going through pain, you have to go through pain for the emotional authenticity. Otherwise, it's not going to read organically. So I feel like it's very important to just take some time off, be kind to yourself, and don't read your writing after you've written it. Give yourself time because you're going to just add salt to the injury. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you for that. Barbara, do you want to go next?
That was actually a question I had written down when you'd asked if we had questions for each other, was what was the emotional toll all these very heavy stories had on all of you writers. I know for myself, definitely, when my character is in pain, I definitely feel like I'm, especially the lead, I'm, just a kind of a superimposition on her, and that I feel what she goes through. And I started my career as an actor, and, the body doesn't understand the difference between a trauma that's happening to a character and a trauma that's happening to you. So it is very important, like Nafiza was saying, to throw it off afterwards. And we literally do exercises where we throw it off physically. I've got this little mini trampoline in my closet that I jump on, and it's incredibly powerfully helpful to get rid of those emotions, or to expel those emotions, because they can be very, very difficult to process afterwards. So I feel with my characters, I feel for them. So I do find that part difficult. I can go into depths of depression because of my characters, what they're going through, and I feel like I need to kind of make sure I don't take it that far. But I also think in terms of like just the overall mental health aspect of this discussion, I think when, so much of what everyday people deal with is anxiety. Young people are dealing with anxiety, even if mental health issues, trauma, all of that can be part of it. But anxiety seems to be another part of one of these kind of unifying forces. And I think, we feel like we need to be seen, we want to be heard, and we're in this world of social media, and we want to be heard and seen by social media, which of course is ridiculous, because how can you be seen and heard by thousands of strangers who don't even know you? But when you're reading when you're reading a story, you feel seen by that author, even if they aren't writing about a similar thing that you're going through. And when I'm writing, I feel seen by the creative force inside me, because I'm connecting to something that's difficult that's happening in the world, or happening to this character or whatever. So I think that the physical act of reading a story, and all of us writers are reading too, right? It helps mitigate that sense of anxiety, because characters and stories, and the characters that we are writing, are doing things. Characters have to do stuff. When you're in the real life, you very often sit back and just go, oh my God, I can't do anything. I'm frozen by, life's problems. But characters do stuff, they have to. And so that becomes a very healing process in the end.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Matthew, do you want to go next?
Yeah, everyone's given like really, really beautiful and eloquent answers. And I think Nafiza touched on something really important for me when she was talking about how we go through experiences that our characters go through. And for me, that was quite literal, because I was writing Until We Break and Naomi and Saint and my entire cast as I was a teenager. So I was 17, 18, 19, and I was questioning and thinking about, okay, what does it mean at this age to possibly break, or even break away from like how I always saw myself, and how do I evolve, and how do I change, and how do I step into the future, like bringing this identity that I've like attached myself to so firmly, but then also what does that mean for me to like let that go, and do I have to let that go? Very, very big questions for an 18-year-old, but I think many teenagers can relate that's what we're thinking about. And so for me, it was super, super cathartic, because what it meant was that both myself and Naomi, we both got to be able to be in this dialogue and traverse those questions together. And so it made her story so much more real, because as I was living it, I was feeding those anxieties into the story. Of course, given the context of Naomi and her story as well, but the core of the feelings were the same. And then also at the end of the story, when we get our resolution, both Naomi and myself got those resolutions. So it was like very impactful on both sides. I think that's what makes the story really beautiful for me. And then the other part of the question, I think, was also, before I move on, actually, I did also want to add that I think everyone touched on how like cathartic writing is, and I like 100% agree. And I think sometimes for me, I can't fully process any idea or emotion without putting a pen to paper. Like I have to write about it and use a billion different metaphors before I like get to the core of how I'm really feeling, and before I like go through my own thoughts. And I think that's really important as well. And I'm sure everyone on the panel can relate. I'm seeing a lot of nods, which is great. And in terms of how I deal with those really rough and emotional scenes, many different ways. And I think I also would like to preface this by saying I'm not a mental health professional. So, and I'm not saying how I deal with these are right or wrong. And I'm not saying that other people should replicate what I do. But sometimes for me, like, I just sit in the emotion and I feel everything, and I try not to lessen it for myself, or like tell myself that it's not that serious, because it is that serious sometimes. And sometimes it's important that for me, I feel everything so that the next time I feel it again, I'm familiar with it and I know better how to cope, and it's not hitting me like a truck like it did the time before, and each time it gets easier and easier. And I think growing familiar with those feelings is also what helps me be able to describe it in my novel in a way that's holistic and from a place of knowledge and understanding, and I'm not so shy or scared of the emotion anymore. But yeah, that's my experience.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, so let's go with Bev as our second last.
Yeah, so for me, I've already mentioned how writing is very much for me working out my story, and particularly in I'm Good and Other Lies. And then when the pandemic came along, what was so interesting to me was that so many of my writer friends said they couldn't write. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, for me, it was so great to have a project to devote myself to. And, we were also scared, I think, at the very beginning. If we cast our minds back, the future felt very blurry and scary. And I just felt I need a really big project to be able to shut out all that other stuff. But the other thing is that, and I was already hearing that publishers very soon after, I was hearing, oh, we don't want pandemic books. And people don't want that. They want escapism. And I've always been the kind of person who, as Matthew was just saying, like, I feel comfortable sitting in the feelings. I don't necessarily feel that I have to shut them out. And Susan Cain just wrote a book called Bittersweet, about, maybe it's just my personality that when I'm going through hard things, I want to read about people going through those same hard things. I don't want to distract myself from it. So I'll write about those things and feel fine about it, and I'll consume all the media about it. Yeah, but that's just me, I guess.
Thank you for that. And last but certainly not least, Sara.
I'll just say there's so many things that the panelists said that I agree with. So I'll take it to the next step. This difficult part about being an author and someone who's has some mental health issues myself. It's the feedback piece and the waiting to see if it's going to be published, and the waiting for feedback and waiting for reviews. And that part was crazy hard for me because I have imposter syndrome on a good day. But then I just kind of sat back and relaxed and realized that one thing I'm learning is I don't have control over so many things, but what I do have control over is this piece of art that I put out there. And in my hopes that it can just help one kid or just entertain somebody, make somebody laugh, make somebody cry, make them feel. And so to get over all the scary stuff about publishing and with the mental health background, it's the joy in that even though I can't control anything, we have that power. So that's something that I liked.
Well, thank you all so much. We ran out the clock basically. But I think that was a phenomenal last sort of round to end on. And thank you for wrapping it up so well for us, Sara. So I'm not sure if I think we're done. Oh yeah, no, clock just went to 12:15. So we really did run out the clock, but it was amazing. You all kept right on time. This was like the best job as a moderator. I didn't even have to cut anybody off. So thank you all so much for your fantastic answers and for answering my questions. And it was a real pleasure to be here with you. And I will hand it off to the Infusion people to close us off.
Thank you, Rob, for being such a great moderator.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Fellow writers.
Rob, as always, just the best of the best, thebomb.com. We absolutely, he's been with us since literally day one. I can't even tell everyone. So we can never thank him enough. But thank you all so much for joining us today, to our panelists and moderator, Rob. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us for such an important and in-depth conversation. I can tell you, like, firstly, I just feel very enlightened just listening to it. So I can imagine the impact is tenfold for a lot of other folks. Thank you all so much for this. For those who are joining us after, we'll see you at 12:30. Until then, enjoy your small little break. And for everybody else who's leaving us after this, have a beautiful Saturday ahead, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.